Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Church on the Green, located in New Haven, Connecticut. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are invited and welcome. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Church on the Green, please visit our website at unitednewhaven.org. Thank you.
Reading is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 35, verses 1 through 10, which can be found at page 663 in your pew Bibles. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it, the majesty of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God. Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, do not fear. Here is your God. He will come with vengeance, with terrible recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. For water shall break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The haunt of jackals shall become a swamp. The grass shall become reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. The unclean shall not travel on it, but it shall be for God's people. No traveler, not even fool, shall go astray. No lion shall be there, nor shall any ravenous beast come upon it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return, and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Friends, God is still speaking. May our hearts be open to listen and understand.
Would you pray with me, please? O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your presence. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad, says the prophet. Have you ever been to the wilderness? Now, I don't mean a trip to the White Mountains or the Catskills or the Adirondacks or the Rockies or the wilds of Alaska, at least not as most of us would visit them. I'm not talking about the kind of place where you can venture forth for leisure or hiking or meditative quiet or wildlife photography or panoramic vistas with a campsite or a lodge or a hotel room waiting for you at the end of the day. I mean the kind of wilderness that Isaiah knew. I mean a place that is stark and desolate, a place that is lonely and fearful, a place where your human vulnerability is on full display. I mean a stony desert where it feels like you've stepped into an oven. The sun's rays are pressing you into the ground. An arid landscape where, unless you are literally standing on the bank of a river, the only sign of water is a few scrubby bushes whose roots must have found the tiniest of droplets somewhere deep in a crack in the parched earth. A place populated by creatures that would be only too happy to tear you limb from limb, given the opportunity. I mean, the kind of wilderness where most of us would not choose to go, and yet sometimes we end up there anyway. The kind of wilderness where someone has betrayed your trust, someone who was supposed to help you, hurt you instead. A confidence that was supposed to be cradled close was scattered to the four winds. A place where you were supposed to be safe turned into a minefield. A promise was made and then broken. And now even the familiar landscape of home looks strange and foreign. The kind of wilderness where loss has upended your world, an accident, an overdose, a fire, a sudden heart attack, or a relationship that once was the solid ground on which you stood, eroded and eroded until it was nothing but shifting sand under your feet. Or a long drawn-out suffering where that beloved one slipped away one moment, one memory, one cell at a time, and in their absence everything feels empty and forlorn. I mean the kind of wilderness where you can no longer trust your body or your mind to do what it's supposed to do, where you suddenly need help with things that used to happen effortlessly without a thought. When the doctor says cancer or infertility or bipolar or dialysis or dementia, where life feels fragile and the future feels out of reach. The kind of wilderness where you muster the courage to tell the truth about who you are or what has happened to you, and people doubt it, or denounce it, or debate it, or deny it, or downplay it until you begin to think you must be crazy. I mean the kind of wilderness where your job is gone but the bills still need to be paid, where you're choosing between heat and food and medicine because you can't afford all three, where you can't stay where you are any longer but you don't know where you'll go or who will take you in. The kind of wilderness where it feels like the things that matter most to you are being chipped away at one by one, where those who hold power seem bent on using it for their own gain instead of the common good, where those who are vulnerable find themselves pushed further and further to the margins, where fear settles into your belly like a lead weight, and you agonize over the future for yourself, your children, your grandchildren. That's the kind of wilderness that Isaiah knew, the kind of place he meant when he said the words Al read for us this morning: the wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. Strengthen the weak hands, make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, do not fear. For water shall break forth in the wilderness, streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Now, it feels a little incongruous, maybe, to think about that kind of desolate wilderness and those radiant promises of hope, but here's what Isaiah knew. That the same wilderness that scares you to death can also be the place where you find new life. That the same wilderness that strips away everything that protects you from the world can also be the place where you find strength you did not know you had. That the same wilderness that peels back those layers of pretense and presentation can also be the place where you discover an authentic self you had almost forgotten. That in the desert, there are flowers. That amidst the rocks and pebbles and stones, there are gems. That even in the wilderness, there is help. That with all the other lonely, hurting people, with all the weak hands and feeble knees and fearful hearts, which is to say all the children of God, there is a family. That the wilderness where most of us would not choose to go, and yet sometimes we end up there anyway, that is God's natural habitat. That is God's chosen home. That is God's favorite place to show up. That God chooses to appear in times of hardship, in places of suffering, in lives of uncertainty, in times of fear. That God chooses to take flesh to join us in mortal life, because no price is too high to impede God's desire to be with us, to accompany us, to live with us, to rejoice with us, to suffer with us, to love with us. So if you are in the wilderness now, know this. Exactly where you are, God is coming to prepare a way for you. Waters shall break forth in the wilderness, streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. God will make a way where there seems to be no way, a broad, straight highway where only twisted, stony paths have been. No traveler will go astray. You will journey together with all the other sojourners until everyone who is wandering, lost in the wilderness, is found. And if you have traveled your own wilderness at some previous point and have come out the other side, if you now find yourself in a comfortably familiar landscape, then know this. There is someone nearby who needs the word of comfort that only you can bring. There is someone who needs you to help make the desert rejoice and blossom. There is someone whose trembling knees need your reinforcement. There is someone who cannot yet find their way to that wilderness highway, but who might be able to get there if you take their hand. And no matter where your path lies in these days, know this. The promise of Isaiah is for you, for me, for all of us, for all the earth, that the wilderness and dry land shall be glad, that even the desert shall rejoice and blossom, that fearful hearts shall be comforted, that God's people shall be carried home with joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Or in the words of one of my favorite poets, artists, and pastors, Jan Richardson, with every step you take, this blessing rises up to meet you. It has been waiting long ages for you. Look close, and you can see the layers of it. How it has been fashioned by those who walked this road before you. How it has been created of nothing but their determination and dreaming. How it has taken its form from an ancient hope that drew them forward and made a way for them when no way could be seen. Look closer and you will see this blessing is not finished. That you are part of the path it is preparing. That you are how this blessing means to be a voice within the wilderness and a welcome for the way. May it be so. Amen.